Hello, my name is William Parker, and I'm the historical interpreter here at Fort Defiance. We fall under the Parks and Rec in Clarksville, Tennessee. And I did a couple lectures a while ago, a few weeks ago. One of them on Civil War rations, one on Civil War weaponry. And somebody had made a comment down below, and they had asked, what did the Civil War soldier wear? What were their uniforms like? And I thought, that's a great opportunity for me to talk about that. And when you first think about it, that's pretty mundane or pretty obvious. Well, it's not. And each individual item tells its own little story. And that's what I want to talk about this morning here. Let's just start at the top and work our way down. The Civil War soldier. Oh, something else I want to mention first off too. Obviously, there were two sides of the Civil War, the North and the South. I've got the Union stuff here. The reason being, it was so much more, no pun intended, uniform than the Confederate stuff was. The Confederacy, remember, is a brand new country. They hadn't started cranking out uniforms yet. The soldiers brought what they had from home, homemade stuff that their moms, girlfriends, wives made for them, or stuff that the states could give them. The North, however, they already had a standing army, and it's easier to interpret. So that's what I want to talk about today. The kepi, French term. This is the headgear that all the soldiers were issued, made out of wool. And during the campaign season, which was just about 8 months out of the year, and usually when it was hot, you can imagine wearing this wool kepi on your head. There's no ventilation whatsoever. And look what color it is. It may look black, but it's dark blue. So you can imagine that heat when you're marching 10 miles a day, bearing down here. That's why there were so many heat strokes during the Civil War. Sometimes it would actually, like a Kennesaw Mountain, it could actually affect the outcome of the battle. Yeah. But that was the kepi. On the top of it, this is the hunting horn here. This is the emblem for infantry. Those of you that are in the Army today are probably thinking, well, today the emblem for infantry is crossed rifles. Well, it became crossed rifles in 1872. Prior to that, it was the hunting horn here. Now, this is the official issue headgear. However, especially here in the Western theater, most of the fighting here in Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, soldiers would tend to discard these and would obtain their own headgear, usually a slouch hat. If you look at photographic evidence during the Civil War, soldiers here in the Western theater, and a slouch hat is kind of a nondescript, like cowboy hat that they would wear. It was much more comfortable. It kept the sun off of them, where it had a wide brim on it, and just a better utilitarian headgear than the kepi here. However, the lowly kepi was in use all the way in issue to the very end of the war. Now, the jacket itself. This is what every soldier, enlisted man, was issued when he enlisted in the Army. It's called the 4-button sack coat. 4 buttons, 4 brass buttons. It's made of wool also. You can see it is dark blue too. So in addition to the kepi on your head, you're wearing this on your body. It is lined in cotton. A lot of soldiers, when they were on campaign, would cut the lining out of it, and it would make it a little bit more comfortable during the summer. But you got to keep in mind, you're probably not going to get another uniform till winter comes around. So, but it's wool on the outside, cotton on the inside, and it's pretty shapeless. This is not fancy. It's not built to be on parade, to impress people. It is a simple, loose cut uniform. Very utilitarian also. Working our way down. The pants. Wool also. You're going to see this theme here as we go through, okay? These are called sky blue trousers. For obvious reasons, the color of them. If you work crosswords, A-Z-U-R-E, sky blue color. These are, they don't have belt loops in them. They had suspenders. They didn't have that term back then, suspenders. They were referred to as braces. So if you see that term, braces, that's what they're talking about, or suspenders to hold your trousers up. Very good construction. I want to mention something else too. Sometimes people will ask, well, why didn't they make a summer wage tunic made out of like cotton, something that would be cooler? Same thing with the pants. If they did, it wouldn't last very long. The rigors that these uniforms were put through, they would completely fall apart. They wouldn't last long at all. This stuff is very, very well made, and it's probably going to last you all year long. It's got a fly front with 5 buttons down the front. Once again, not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's going to last. And that's really what they were looking for, items that were built to last. Let's move down here. Nondescript socks. One of the most important items that a Civil War soldier carried. They were issued, this is just like the government issued socks here. They were issued 2 pairs upon enlistment. These were the shoddiest construction that you can imagine. I've never worn these before, but they're very thin. And it was interesting, I was doing some research last night, more on Civil War uniforms, and it was interesting to read the soldiers' accounts of their socks. One man said, after a couple days, I was pulling my socks up, and instantly they became a stovepipe. What he meant, they were open on both ends. They just didn't hold up very well. But it was always important, as you're going to see here in a couple minutes, why you would want a good pair of thick socks. Most of the soldiers would have family members from home that would knit socks and send them to them in the mail. That was the most preferred method, but the government did issue them. My favorite item to talk about, the Civil War shoes. You might know what these were called? They were called brogans, B-R-O-G-A-N-S. Growing up, every now and then I would hear an old timer. If I walked in wearing big heavy boots or something, they would comment, "Got your brogans on." I had no idea what they were talking about, but now I know since I started studying this stuff. These were the Civil War shoes. Guess what they're made out of? It's not wool. One of the few things. These are leather. Almost 100% leather. The only non-leather item in here are the little tacks that hold the heels on. These, I don't know where to start with these things. I mentioned socks were important. You know what? Just as important were your shoes. You were campaigning, as I mentioned, 8 months out of the year, marching 10 miles a day. You absolutely wanted a good pair of shoes. A lot of veteran soldiers, when they were on campaign, look at photographs of Civil War soldiers, they would take their shoes off, put them in their pack, and just walk barefooted. And a lot of people, well, that's ridiculous. Why? Well, they wanted to save their shoes because they knew winter was coming. And when winter arrived, you had better have a good pair of shoes. Soldier was supposed to be, this was on paper, I was reading this last night, very, very seldom was this in practice. You were supposed to be issued 4 pairs a year. I can tell you that just didn't happen. Okay? There wasn't enough leather to construct these things. So if you had a good pair of shoes, take care of them. Kind of a little morbid side of it here. It's a reality. If you look at, especially Matthew Brady's photographs of the Civil War, after the battles, he went to Sharpsburg, Antietam, he went to Gettysburg, photographed the battlefield, all the dead soldiers out there. If you look at those soldiers closely, they're all missing their shoes. Somebody is already going around there that didn't have any and is taking the shoes off. And I know that sounds morbid today, but people, it was life or death, whatever you needed to do to survive. Something else I was reading last night I thought was interesting. There were, it's going to come as a shock to some of you, but there were unscrupulous contractors back then. And the government would contract for them to make shoes for the army. The shoes would come in, the soldiers would be issued the shoes, they would put them on, look like regular shoes. They would get a few miles down the road, they didn't realize the contractor had used cardboard soles to save money and ripped off the government and ripped off the soldiers. And one incident I was reading last night, the soldier had written home and he said, we got a couple miles down the road and our shoes have completely worn out. Wow. Now you're stuck without shoes for several months. So, yeah. The Rogans, very important. Something else too, personal testimony here. I did living history for several years. 3 times I marched, these were the shoes that I used when I did living history. I marched from Fort Henry to Fort Donaldson wearing all of this gear, 12 miles, wearing these Rogans here. And believe it or not, after probably a couple hundred miles wearing these things total, they become fairly comfortable. And I did all 3 of those marches, didn't get any blisters or anything. One other interesting fact about these that I want to mention, school kids that come through here find this hard to believe. They hadn't come up with the concept yet of a right shoe and a left shoe. When these were issued, they were just straight ahead. There was no left or right boot. If you wore a size 10, they just threw you 2 10 shoes. And after, once again, a couple hundred miles on these things, they turn into a left shoe and a right shoe. But that's not the way they were issued. I always thought that was interesting. Last item I want to talk about, and once again, I was doing research on this last night, and I found this very interesting here. This is the greatcoat, or overcoat, sky blue also, made out of wool. But this is the time here where you want this thing to be worn. You want this to be worn. It's got a 5-button front on it. It's got a cape on the outside with 6 buttons on it. The cape just provided extra warmth over your shoulder. It comes down to about the knees. Very, very heavy, very warm, and universally despised. If you take, I was reading some primary sources last night, it seems like the only time that Civil War soldiers mention their overcoat is when they're talking about discarding them, throwing them away. These things, I mentioned earlier, were heavy, and if they got wet, they were extremely heavy. And one of the soldiers mentioned, I find them to be more of a hindrance than to actually be helpful. So what the soldiers would do, and you would think, well, why would they throw away their overcoat? They would throw it away, and they would substitute it with 1 or 2 blankets. I've got a wool blanket here. They would usually carry 2 blankets. And not only that, this thing, if you're on the march, you're probably not going to be wearing your overcoat, even in the winter, because your body's warm. This thing is hard to carry. What do you do with it? Do you wrap it around you, put it in your backpack? There's no place for it on the backpack. Now the blankets, however, you can roll them up and make a neat little horseshoe roll out of it. It's so much more easy to carry and easy to maintain than this overcoat here. But they would, every soldier was issued one. And I read an account too of a Confederate. They didn't have an issued overcoat like this. Some of the states may give you ones, but someone was asking about obtaining wearing an overcoat. They said, we never carried them. He said, besides, if we wanted one, we could always follow the Union Army and just pick up one that did throw away. So, yeah. The lowly overcoat. Those are the items there that the Civil War soldier clothing that was issued. If you've got any questions about it, or if you want to see this stuff in person, come visit us up at the fort, 120 Duncan Street, Fort Defiance. We would love to talk to you more about this. Thank you for watching.
Hi, today on the Craft Corner with Parks and Rec, we are going to make a whirligig, which is a colonial children's toy. For this fun little toy, you are going to need cardboard, scissors to cut the cardboard, piece of yarn, and something to poke the holes. I'm using a circular pick. So once you cut the cardboard to the size you'd like, you're just going to take the pick or the sharp object and puncture it and get the holes big enough for the yarn. Then you're going to thread the yarn through both holes. One, two, And then you're going to knot the ends together. You can also do this using a button and some thick thread. Once you get the ends knotted, you're going to put your cardboard in the center and just spin it forward. This is tightening the string or the yarn, and then you just let it go. And depending on how you do it, it'll keep winding up for you. So let's try this again. We're gonna wind it, and then I'm gonna grab and you pull. Well, that's a whirligig. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little craft. We'll see you next time on the Craft Corner. Bye.
Okay, during Victorian times, people took the Sabbath and resting on the Sabbath seriously. They didn't have radios, they didn't have TV, they didn't have DVD players, they didn't have any of our electronic entertainments. So actually they were extremely religious churchgoers. And I mean religious by they went to church every time there was a church service. And they actually followed the idea that the Sabbath was a day of rest. So not only did they not work, but there were things that they didn't allow their kids to play normally. There were toys that were just Sunday toys, were church toys. And one of those was a handkerchief doll. And the handkerchief doll is really great because you can make it from stuff you find around the house. And your kid could play with it in church, and if they dropped it, it wouldn't make a big noise and disrupt anything to retrieve it. So, the way that you make a church doll is, or a handkerchief doll, is first of all, you get a handkerchief. Now, you can make it out of just about any pliable square of material. You're also going to need something to make the head, a filler. Now here I have cotton bag, but you could use an extra piece of material, scraps, whatever you wanted to make the head. And of course, something to tie the things into the doll, like secure the head, and maybe make arms. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your filler, whatever it is, stuff it in here, and make a head. And I have a long piece of ribbon here, so I'm going to tie off the head with this ribbon. I'll just make a knot in it. Now, if you were really desperate, you'd hand the kid this and tie this nicely into a bow. If you want to get fancy about it, you make arms. The easiest way to make the arms is after you make the head, you just spread out the rest of the handkerchief. And what you could either do is take a piece of string and maybe tie it close to the corners here, or if you want it to be a bit more angelic, you take the ribbon, you go under one side of the material, and you come back around behind the head on one side, and you do it as well on the other side. And you tie it back here. And you can arrange the arms. They like turn into little wings. And you can tie a bow in the ribbon. Let's bring it, what? I need to get rid of the bunching back here. You tie a bow in the ribbon. Make it fancy as you want. And then you almost have like a little angel doll. Now there are a lot of things that you can do with this doll to dress it up. You can take embroidery, thread, or even a pen and make a little face. If you want to get real fancy, what you would do is you would put lace at the bottom of the handkerchief here, which would emphasize more and more that this is a dress. And then you could even make a little bonnet for them. You can dress this up as nice as you want. And as you can see, it makes no noise when you drop it. There's no noise with playing with it. And it's really simple and really fast. And now you've got yourself a handkerchief doll.
Hello, my name is William Parker, and I'm the historical interpreter here at Fort Defiance in Clarksville, Tennessee. I want to get out of my comfort zone a little bit here this morning, and I want to talk to you about one of the main staples of the Civil War soldiers' diet, and that was hardtack. If you saw a few weeks ago, I did a little piece on rations of the Civil War. I breezed over that, but I want to go into a little bit more detail here, and also tell you how where you can make these things at home. All right, let's get started here, out of our comfort zone. First, a little bit about hardtack. What it was Army bread. And any Civil War soldier that wrote about their experiences in the war, they usually talked about having to eat hardtack. It was issued in wooden crates. It came out to the field. You never knew when you opened up the crate of hardtack what you were going to get. Sometimes it was molded, sometimes it had cobwebs in it, sometimes it had worms in it. You just never knew what you were going to get. If you were lucky, it may even be fresh, okay? Well, this is how they made this stuff. And I made a batch last night of the dough, and I've already got that made out. I'll explain to you how to, got the recipe right here, how to make this. Start out with 6 cups of plain white flour. And by the way, you're going to see the ingredients. It's very simple for this, okay? Didn't provide a whole lot of nutrition, but it filled the soldiers up. 6 cups of plain white flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and mix in 1.5 to 2 cups of water. Mix that stuff all up and make a thick dough, which is what I did last night. Got that right here. Okay? Mix it until it's a stiff dough. That's what I've done. Knead it for several minutes, which I already did last night. Put it in this said ungreased pan, but I had an expert cook, my wife, saying, you know what, you should probably put that in a greased pan. So I did. So I'm going to recommend it worked out fine in a greased pan. Put it in a greased pan and flatten it out. Until it's about 1/2 inch thick, which actually is about the lip of this right here. So that was what I was using last night. That worked out real great. And I have something here that the Civil Wars, the bakers that made this stuff didn't have, a pizza cutter. You would not have found that. So I'm getting out of the impression here a little bit, but I'm going to use a pizza cutter. Cut it into 4-inch squares. That was the size of the hardtack. Cut off the edges there. So this is going to make 4 crackers here. Separate them out. Square them up. See right there, made 4 of these. And to make this period correct, there were 16 holes that were punched while it was still doughy in the top of it. I've got a simple house screw that I just found a few minutes ago. You can use whatever you want to. The recipe that I had mentioned a nail, whatever you want to use. This looked a little bit better, it's not as pointy. So, make the holes in it. And if you Google hardtack, you will see the original hardtack. There's plenty of, I did it last night, there's plenty of photographs of it. It always has these 16 holes. Some had 12, but they always had holes to ventilate them when it was baking. And that's about what it's going to look like prior to the baking process right there. Now, I just so happen to have a batch that I made last night. Well, I had great fun doing that. The house smelled great after this. And this is what I've got to mention. These did not come out as well as I would like. They're not perfect, but you can see with the holes in them, the army crackers. And the consistency of them, I only baked these for about 20 minutes. One of the recipes said bake it for 2 hours on a low temperature. I had these on 450 degrees for about 20 minutes, and these are fairly soft. A lot of the ones that were issued during the Civil War, they were cooked at a lower temperature. They wanted to bake all the moisture out of it, and these things were rock hard. Some of the soldiers nicknamed them tooth dollars, flint crackers, iron rations, all the different things because of how they were. But when you get to this stage, preheat the oven. Like I said, I put these on 450, put them in, baked them for about 20 minutes. And this will be a fun thing to play Civil War in the backyard with some authentic rations. And if you want to learn more about this, proceed up to the fort, 120 Duncan Street.